the Ryugyong Hotel in Pyongyang, North Korea. So every tourist destination needs a range of places for visitors to stay, and while it may come as a surprise that arguably the most ambitious hotel project to have ever taken place was one in the capital city of North Korea, Pyongyang. And things didn't exactly go to plan. The hotel, at over 1,000 feet or 330 meters tall and with 105 floors, is a pyramid-shaped skyscraper that was meant to be the world's tallest hotel when work began on it in 1987, which was a time when the country was looking for ways to project an image of success and technological strength. North Korea needed a landmark that would outdo its competitor South Korea and make a statement to the world. With a design unlike any other skyscraper of its time, the Ryugyong Hotel was just that. With 3,000 rooms, several revolving restaurants, and luxurious features, it would be ideal for hotels, but also the basic needs of its population. So work on the hotel was paused in 1992 when funding dried up. In 2008, Egyptian company Orascom Group provided a significant investment as part of a telecommunications agreement with North Korea, and this saw the installation of glass panels on the exterior, making it look like, from a distance, that the hotel is actually complete. Now, though, at night the structure is illuminated with LED lights, and while this may look impressive, it's far more of a distraction from the fact that so money has been wasted on what's essentially a large concrete pyramid with no usable space within the actual structure. Number 14. The Kemper Project in Mississippi. The Kemper Project, which was also known as the Kemper County Energy Facility, was a hugely ambitious energy project in the U.S. and one that promised to bring a green revolution. It was meant to be a showcase of cutting-edge clean coal technology, where it would generate electricity from lignite coal while capturing and storing most of the ground or repurposed, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. And Southern Company, which is a major utility provider in the southeast of the U.S., and its subsidiary Mississippi Power took on the project in 2010 with a budget of around $2.4 billion, and the plan that it would be completed by 2014. As construction began, though, various issues arose that caused the budget to multiply and the timeline to stretch. By the time the Mississippi Power abandoned the clean coal aspect of the Kemper project in 2017, the cost had risen to over $7.5 billion, with a long list of issues that were insurmountable. Environmental groups also criticized the project, arguing that it was a waste of resources that could be better spent on truly renewable energy like wind and solar, and regulatory bodies were increasingly skeptical about the feasibility of the clean coal technology being used. In 2017, Mississippi Power announced it was suspending the coal gasification component of the plant, and Kemper was converted to operate solely 14th century, and it was meant to be a tower that would be higher and more impressive than the nearby Qutub Minar. It was one of the greatest undertakings of the time, but the tower was never completed, and all that remains today is a massive rough stone base that rises about 80 feet, which is far shorter than the original plant height of 275 feet. The Sultan, who ruled from 1296 to 1316, was known for his military conquests and his construction projects. Having extended the boundaries of his empire through successful campaigns in southern India, he wanted to further develop his capital, Delhi, to be a place that would show off his power. To do this, he began a number of architectural projects, including the expansion of the Qutb complex, where the Minar stood. Alauddin wanted to build a tower even taller than the Qutb Minar, which would mean that the Alai Minar would become a symbol of his dominance. But building a monument like this required enormous resources, labor, and materials, and without a strong and determined leader to push things forward, it became increasingly difficult to continue. Next to each other, showing in clear detail the fine margins between success and failure when it comes to ambitious projects. Number 12. Mexico City Texcoco Airport. The Texcoco Airport, officially known as the new international airport for Mexico City, was an ambitious project that was meant to help handle the increasing air traffic needs of one of the world's largest cities. The original idea for this new airport in Mexico came from restrictions of the existing Benito Juarez International Airport, which was facing severe overcrowding. Built decades ago, Benito Juarez had reached its maximum capacity and was struggling to accommodate the rising number of passengers and flights. By the early 2010s, the need for a new, larger airport became clear, and the Texcoco site to the northeast of Mexico City was chosen because of its potential for expansion. The project, which launched in 2014, included 6 runways and would be capable of handling up to 125 million passengers each year, which is more than double the current capacity. Structure on this land. There were also issues related to local communities, including allegations that the project would displace residents and disturb indigenous peoples, which led to large-scale public opposition to the airport. On the back of this, in 2018, Andrés Manuel López Obrador was elected president of Mexico, and one of his campaign promises was to reconsider this airport project, which he argued was too costly. Despite concerns about the referendum's legitimacy, the results favored canceling the project, and with costs spiraling to around $13 billion, there was no choice but to accept that there was no future for the site as an airport. More recently, though, it has instead been repurposed into an ecological park, which has been designed as a place for residents to relax and allow nature to thrive. Number 11. Golden Finance 117 in Tianjin, China. Also known as the China 117 Tower, it's a huge, incomplete skyscraper. This super tall is a 5-star hotel and high-end apartments, and to become a center for the wealthy business leaders who were expected to be moving to Tianjin. There were, though, of course, significant delays almost from the beginning. The first phase of construction took way longer than had been expected, and it was only until 2015 that the building's core structure had been topped out, reaching its full height of 1,958 feet. Even with this done, things behind the scenes were becoming trickier, and soon there were no funds left to complete it. To make matters worse, China has imposed restrictions on real estate speculation and issued policies to calm the property market. Measures like these put further pressure on developers like the Golden Group, limiting their access to financing and making it more difficult to complete large projects like the Golden Finance 117. Currently, though, it's holding a record for being the tallest unoccupied building on Earth, but it's still hoped that this maybe someday will be completed and used. In the mid-20th century, when city planners saw the need for a solution to keep traffic moving with a growing population. Originally, the concept was to have a series of highways around the city forming a continuous loop, but there have been several problems that meant that while large parts of the road have now been completed, it isn't fully connected. One of the main reasons for this is the strong environmental opposition the project has encountered. Stockholm is known for an approach that prioritizes sustainability and environmental protection, and large infrastructure projects that could potentially disrupt natural landscapes often face issues. Environmental groups and local activists raise concerns about the impact of the construction on water quality, natural habitats, and the integrity of Stockholm's natural surroundings. These concerns led to legal battles, protests, and repeated delays as project plans were reviewed. Financial issues also prevented the full project from being completed. Initially estimated to cost about $3 billion, than 11,000 miles or almost 18,000 kilometers of railway across Argentina, trains are a hugely important way of getting around in the country. The infrastructure, though, is aging, and it can take quite some time to get from place to place, which is why the idea of the Buenos Aires to Rosario to Cordoba high-speed railway was put forward to connect three of the country's largest and most economically important cities. Proposed in 2006, the high-speed rail would have reduced travel times substantially, and on one route would have taken 3 hours instead of 28, which would have potentially been a massive benefit. Despite initial excitement and huge investment, however, the project was eventually canceled and it still remains unfinished. It was part of a wider effort to modernize Argentina's infrastructure and establish the country as a regional leader in high-speed rail. The trains were expected to reach speeds of up to 200 miles an hour, or about 320 kph, and would have been the first high-speed rail project in Latin America. Although financing was initially arranged through a loan from the French bank, the economic instability, ultimately, with just the preliminary work completed, the Buenos Aires to Rosario to Cordoba high-speed railway was abandoned, and this shows how difficult it is for countries with volatile economies to undertake large-scale infrastructure projects. Number 8. Torre de la Escalera. The Torre de la Escalera was a skyscraper project in Cartagena, Colombia, which was meant to add a new feature to the city skyline and to lead an economic renaissance. Located on the Caribbean coast, Cartagena is known for its rich history and colonial architecture, and for being a tourist hotspot. And this skyscraper would have become one of the tallest buildings in Colombia. It was planned as a 675-foot or 206-meter-tall residential tower with 58 floors. It would have offered luxury apartments with views out across the Caribbean. The construction began in 2005 at a time when Cartagena was going through a real estate boom. The city's growing tourism industry and its economic development attracted investment in luxury properties, and developers saw the underlying ground conditions hadn't been properly assessed before construction began, and the engineers had failed to account for the soft soil. This oversight meant that the foundation was insufficient to safely support the tower's planned height. Legal challenges, too, then began between the project developers, contractors, and the regulatory bodies over responsibility for the construction issues. These battles further delayed any possibility of restarting construction, as authorities argued about whether the structure should be demolished or if it could be salvaged through expensive engineering interventions. Either way, the cost of retrofitting the structure to ensure safety would have been prohibitively high. So this project was never completed, and the skeletal remains of the structure still stand in place. Moving on to number 7, the superconducting super collider in Texas. The LHC, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, is the largest particle accelerator in the world, and since opening in 2008, it's been central to our understanding of particle physics, elementary particles, and it would have positioned the United States as a global leader in particle physics research. In 1987, Congress approved the project with an initial budget of around $4.4 billion, and construction began in 1991. Involving the design and installation of thousands of powerful superconducting magnets, as well as digging the underground tunnel, the project soon began to face problems, mostly due to its cost. By the early 1990s, the budget for the collider had escalated far beyond the initial estimates, eventually reaching around $12 billion, which was almost triple the original amount. The SSC, as a highly specialized scientific project, was seen by some politicians as a luxury rather than a necessity, and with little support outside the scientific community, the House of Representatives voted to cancel the project in 1993. The country lost the chance to have the world's most advanced particle accelerator and missed out on one of the greatest scientific discoveries that would become the tallest man-made structure in the world. Featuring a unique design that was inspired by the lily flower, along with elements of traditional Islamic minarets. It was to be part of the Dubai Creek Harbor, which is a large-scale development by Emaar Properties. The tower would have become a major tourist attraction and a new global landmark, and the design had a slender, needle-like structure being held in place by a series of steel cables, and one of the highest observation decks in the Arabian Gulf. Work began on it soon after the announcement, but within a few years, construction was paused, in large part due to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. The global economic downturn that was triggered by the pandemic significantly affected Dubai's economy, which relied heavily on tourism, real estate, and international investments. With travel restrictions and reduced demand for property, the economic case for the Dubai Creek Harbor project was brought into question, and there was no choice but to stop and reassess. Building a structure of such may one day be completed if market conditions improve, but this would take a major shift in fortunes, and it's seen as being highly unlikely to happen. Number 5. The HS2 in the UK. HS2, which stands for High Speed 2, was one of the United Kingdom's most ambitious projects, and it was meant to improve connectivity between London, the Midlands, and the North. Planned as a high-speed rail network capable of significantly reducing travel times, the promise was that it would bring economic stimulus to regions outside London, reduce road congestion, and offer a greener alternative to domestic air travel. It was originally proposed in 2 main phases, with the first phase linking London and Birmingham, and the second phase extending further north. Phase 2 was divided into 2 sections, Phase 2A, connecting Birmingham to Crewe, and Phase 2B, connecting Crewe to Manchester. And after being originally budgeted at around $42 billion, the projected costs of HS2 are now beyond $130 billion. This substantial increase in cost sparked public and political debate over whether the project was financially viable, especially with the UK's economic uncertainty. So in 2023, the government was forced to announce major cuts. The Phase 2B leg that was supposed to extend from Birmingham to Leeds was cancelled entirely, which removed a huge reason why the whole route was designed in the first place. There was the news that the Birmingham to Manchester leg had been cancelled as well, meaning that instead of helping to level up northern regions of the country, it's become another transport network that's based around the capital city. The whole thing has been hugely controversial in the UK, where there's the perception that all of the important development happens in the south, and where there's the feeling that the money could have been far better invested into northern regions for other modes of transport. Right now, though, work is ongoing, and the stages of HS2 are still being built. People. It began as a part of a wider plan to generate hydroelectric power along the Yangtze, where a number of other dams, including the world-famous Three Gorges Dam, have already been built. Positioned downstream from Chongqing, the dam was set to produce electricity and create jobs, which would boost the local economy and improve its energy infrastructure, as well as helping to control seasonal flooding along the Yangtze. From the beginning, though, there were problems because of environmental concerns. Dams, by their nature, have a huge impact on the local landscape with the creation of a reservoir, but this one was ultimately seen as being a step too far. The planned location for the dam within the boundaries of a nature reserve protected one of the last remaining habitats of rare and endangered fish in the Yangtze. This area, known as the Upper Yangtze Rare and Endemic Fish National Nature Reserve, is home to several species that are found nowhere else in the world, and experts and conservationists argued that building the dam would harm the ecosystem by disrupting the natural flow of the river. Number 3. The Virgil C. Summer Nuclear Expansion Project in South Carolina. The Virgil C. Summer Nuclear Expansion Project was seen as one major step towards revitalizing nuclear energy in the United States and involved adding 2 new nuclear reactors to the generating station in Jenkinsville, South Carolina. First suggested in the late 2000s, these reactors were designed to be advanced AP1000 reactors, which were a new generation of device that had been developed by Westinghouse Electric. The expansion was initially billed as being the nuclear renaissance in the United States, with hopes that it would help meet rising energy demands and reduce the reliance on fossil fuels. The project's 2 new reactors were expected to add around 2,200 megawatts of capacity, which is enough to power about 1 million homes, at an estimated cost of $9.8 billion. Construction began in 2013, and the reactors were initially expected to be completed by 2017 and 2018. The project was meant to prove the viability of the next generation of nuclear technology, in size to $25 billion by the time it had been canceled. The burden of those cost overruns fell heavily on the utility companies and ultimately on South Carolina taxpayers, who saw tax increases to cover the mounting expenses. Eventually, in 2017, Westinghouse, the lead contractor and developer of the AP1000 reactor, filed for bankruptcy due to its own cost overruns and financial mismanagement. Without Westinghouse's support, the project was left without a clear path forward, and the project was abandoned in July of 2017. Billions of dollars had already been spent on it, and even now, the bills of local residents are higher as a result. Perhaps more importantly, though, it showed that the risks in undertaking large-scale nuclear projects like these, it's a major reason why nuclear energy is rarely mentioned when talking about clean alternatives to fossil fuels. Number 2. Lake Siuru, Romania. Governments around the world aren't exactly known for being truthful all the time. 700 acres and create a reservoir to serve local industry. In 1965, after just a few years, the government announced that Lake Siuru was complete, with officials and local media celebrating it as a triumph of socialist engineering and progress. It turned out that instead of being finished, the work had barely even begun on it. The Jiu River, which was to feed the lake, had not been fully redirected and meant that the lake existed only on paper, and the announcement of its completion was more a matter of political propaganda than actual engineering accomplishment. Well, the truth about the lake slowly emerged as locals and journalists reported on inconsistencies. People living near the reservoir noticed that there was no water, and the promised benefits of the lake, the irrigation and flood control, never came. Over time, it became clear that the project had never been completed and that the initial reports were misleading, and it was just one of a number of projects that had been exaggerated or falsely reported under Ceausescu's regime. There was the visionary architect Antonio Gaudi, and work began on it in 1882, making it the longest ongoing building project, with the current hope that it still may be finished by 2026. It wasn't, of course, meant to take this long, and the story behind it is almost as fascinating as the building itself. The idea began in 1882 when a local bookseller, Josep Maria Boccabella, launched the project. Inspired by his Catholic faith. Initially, the basilica was meant to be a conventional Gothic revival church, and architect Francisco de Paula de Villar was designing it. After disagreements with the project's backers, though, Villar resigned, and in 1883 Antonio Gaudi took over the project. His design incorporated unique organic forms inspired by nature, new structural elements, and a blend of architectural styles. It was a hugely ambitious plan, with the basilica designed as a huge structure that would reach the height of more than 500 meters. Passed on to new architects, particularly after it had been partially destroyed in 1936 during the Spanish Civil War when anarchists set fire to his studio. It became more and more difficult to interpret his intentions accurately. Complex geometric forms which were previously difficult to understand can now be digitally modeled, helping architects and builders realize Gaudi's vision more closely than ever before. The work does, though, remain highly specialized, with every piece having to be individually crafted, as no two are exactly the same. Although the target for completion is set for 2026, unforeseen delays like the COVID-19 pandemic have caused setbacks. Right now,